What in the world just happened? While you were probably scrolling through TikTok or arguing about meme coins on Twitter, the most seismic shift in banking history quietly unfolded behind closed doors. I'm talking about a transformation so massive that is about to make early XRP holders look like absolute geniuses. And I'm going to break down exactly why this changes everything. Here's the kicker that'll blow your mind. Jamie Dimon, the same guy who once called Bitcoin a fraud, just laid out JP Morgan's master plan to integrate crypto directly into their $10 trillion daily payment empire. But wait, there's more. Bank of America's CEO Brian Moynihan isn't just watching from the sidelines. He's actively building their own stablecoin infrastructure. And guess what technology they're all gravitating toward? You got it, Ripple's XRP and RLUSD ecosystem. Let me tell you a story that completely changed how I see this space. 3 months ago, I was at a private banking conference in Switzerland. Yeah, one of those stuffy events where everyone wears $1,000 suits and discusses liquidity optimization strategies. I expected the usual corporate buzzword bingo, but something extraordinary happened. This isn't speculation anymore, folks. According to Treasury Department sources, we're witnessing the largest competitive push by traditional banks and financial institutions in decades. Industry insiders report that institutions failing to integrate blockchain-based payment rails within the next 12 to 24 months risk permanent market share erosion to more agile competitors. During the coffee break, I overheard 2 senior executives from major European banks having what they thought was a private conversation. One of them, I won't name names, but let's call him Hans, was explaining how their institution had been quietly testing XRP's on-demand liquidity corridors for 6 months. The results? A 70% reduction in settlement costs and transaction times dropping from 3 days to under 5 seconds. Think about this for a moment. These aren't crypto bros in hoodies talking about diamond hands. These are serious institutional players managing trillions of dollars, and they're realizing that XRP isn't just another cryptocurrency. It's the missing piece in their trillion-dollar infrastructure puzzle. JP Morgan's Strategic 180, from skeptic to strategic believer. Now pay close attention to this next part, because it reveals the institutional decision-making process happening in boardrooms across Wall Street right now. Jamie Dimon's transformation from Bitcoin skeptic to blockchain advocate didn't happen overnight. Federal Reserve data indicates that JP Morgan's payments division already processes nearly $10 trillion daily across global markets, making them the ultimate bridge between traditional correspondent banking alternatives and next-generation settlement infrastructure. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is something most people completely miss. Dimon recently stated, there are things that stablecoins can do that traditional cash can't, like being programmable. I might be able to send a stablecoin, then you can send it to 10 different vendors automatically. This changes everything. JP Morgan's own JPM coin processed over $1 billion daily, but that's confined to their private network. The real game changer? They're exploring partnerships that could leverage XRP's public infrastructure for global liquidity sourcing. Lightbulb moment. Here's the mind-blowing data that industry insiders don't want you to know. JP Morgan's payment segment generated $18.1 billion in revenue during 2024 alone, with payment fees growing at double-digit rates for 4 consecutive quarters. But here's the staggering reality. If banks lose their payment processing dominance to fintech competitors and blockchain-based settlement networks, they're potentially looking at losing several $billion in annual after-tax profits. Let me break this down with a real-world example that'll make your head spin. Traditional cross-border payments, the kind your bank charges you $30 to $50 for, typically take 3 to 5 business days and cost institutions up to 4% in correspondent banking fees. XRP settles the same transaction in 3 to 5 seconds at a cost of $0.0002. We're talking about a 99.9% cost reduction, with settlement times that are literally 100,000 times faster. The implications are absolutely massive. According to institutional research from the Federal Reserve's latest payment system modernization assessment, banks that fail to integrate these rails face existential threats to their business models. And here's where it gets wild for XRP holders. Brian Moynihan from Bank of America dropped some serious institutional intelligence during their recent strategic planning sessions. He confirmed, "It's pretty clear there's going to be a stablecoin, which will be fully dollar-backed, essentially functioning like a money market fund, with checking account accessibility. But wait until you hear the biggest regulatory development that changes everything. The Genius Act, passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, establishes the first comprehensive federal framework for payment stablecoins in United States history. This legislation mandates one-to-one reserve backing, routine independent audits, and robust consumer protection mechanisms. Here's what most people aren't realizing. This regulatory clarity eliminates the compliance uncertainty that previously prevented major banks from entering the stablecoin space. Central bank pilot programs demonstrate that institutions like Bank of America can now build their digital asset strategies around concrete legal requirements rather than navigating unclear regulatory waters. The Stellar Surge, Protocol 23, and the infrastructure race. Think about this while XRP dominates the headlines. Stellar is quietly building something extraordinary. The upcoming Protocol 23 upgrade, scheduled for the 3rd of September 2025, introduces multi-threaded smart contract execution and aggressive WebAssembly caching that could push theoretical throughput to 5,000 transactions per second. We're talking about infrastructure that makes Ethereum look like dial-up internet. But here's the kicker that most analysts miss. Stellar's recent partnerships with Franklin Templeton, tokenizing $446 million in U.S. Treasuries, and PayPal's integration of PYUSD demonstrate that serious institutional money is flowing into alternative blockchain rails. Total value locked on Stellar reached over $100 million, with stablecoin supply hitting record highs of $627 million. This creates a fascinating competitive dynamic. While XRP focuses on institutional cross-border payments, Stellar targets broader financial inclusion and programmable money applications. Both networks are experiencing unprecedented institutional adoption, but through different strategic approaches. The technical superiority, that changes everything. Let me explain something that'll make you understand why banks are gravitating toward these specific technologies. Consider the in-house development timeline banks face. Regulatory readiness takes 3 to 12 months, talent acquisition requires 3 to 6 months, technical development consumes 6 to 12 months, and ecosystem partnerships need another 3 to 6 months. Total development cycle, 12 to 24 months minimum. Compare that to partnering with Ripple or Stellar. Banks can deploy in weeks rather than years, leverage battle-tested infrastructure, and tap into existing compliance frameworks. Industry insiders report that Ripple's 4-year SEC lawsuit actually strengthened their institutional credibility. The $125 million settlement validated their legal resilience. Here's a personal anecdote that perfectly illustrates this. Last month, I spoke with a CTO at a mid-tier regional bank, let's call her Sarah, who was tasked with evaluating blockchain payment solutions. Her team spent 6 months analyzing build versus partner decisions. The economics overwhelmingly favored partnerships. $4.5 million in development costs versus $200,000 annual platform fees with established providers. RLUSD, the institutional grade game changer. Now, here's where the technical superiority becomes obvious. Ripple's RLUSD stablecoin operates under New York Department of Financial Services charter with full regulatory compliance and BNY Mellon providing custodial services. This addresses banks' primary concerns about counterparty risk mitigation and prudential regulations. But here's the strategic advantage that most people miss. RLUSD's dual ledger compatibility enables operation on both XRP Ledger and Ethereum networks, providing banks with maximal flexibility while maintaining Basel III compliance standards. This interoperability addresses the fundamental challenge of banking institutions that need cross-currency settlement efficiency without vendor lock-in. Amina Bank AG became the first global institution to support RLUSD deposits and withdrawals, processing corporate cross-border transactions with settlement finality under 5 seconds and total fees below 0.02% of transaction value. These aren't theoretical benefits, they're measurable efficiency gains that directly impact treasury management solutions. The interoperability challenge. XRP's secret weapon. Here's something that absolutely blew my mind when I first understood it. Banks issuing their own proprietary stablecoins face a fundamental problem. If Bank A issues A coin and Bank B issues B coin, how do they efficiently exchange value between different tokenized systems? This is where XRP functions as a neutral bridge asset with institutional-grade liquidity. The on-demand liquidity corridors enable automatic conversion. Bank A's stablecoin converts to XRP, transfers instantly across the network, then converts to Bank B's preferred settlement currency. This eliminates the need for pre-funded nostril accounts in multiple currencies. Federal Reserve data indicates that this approach can reduce settlement-related funding costs by up to 60% while eliminating the 3-day correspondent banking delays that currently plague cross-border institutional transfers. We're talking about systematic transformation of how global banks manage liquidity and settlement risk. The institutional accumulation pattern, and here's where it gets interesting for long-term XRP holders. Recent SEC filings reveal that institutional wallet addresses holding between 1-10 million XRP increased by 37% over a 90-day period, while exchange-held supplies decreased by 23%, indicating significant accumulation by non-retail participants. A major Chinese firm recently added XRP to its strategic reserves, a move that industry observers believe could trigger broader adoption across Asia. When you combine this with Ripple's $200 million acquisition of Rail and the $1.25 billion Hidden Road purchase, you're seeing systematic infrastructure building that positions XRP as essential financial plumbing. The competitive landscape. Why XRP wins. Let me be brutally honest about the competitive dynamics here. While networks like Solana boast impressive transaction throughput, over 90% of their on-chain activity consists of meme coin speculation rather than institutional financial applications. The recent data shows Solana meme coins collectively held a market capitalization of $15.7 billion, with $5.4 billion in daily trading volume, hardly the foundation for serious institutional adoption. Compare this to Ripple's institutional positioning. Central bank digital currency pilots across multiple countries have selected XRP ledger technology for government-backed digital currency frameworks because it provides the regulatory oversight and systematic risk assessment capabilities that sovereign entities require. Think about the customer bases. Ripple's partnerships include over 350 financial institutions across 50+ countries, focusing on correspondent banking optimization and real-time gross settlement applications. Meanwhile, competing networks primarily serve retail traders and DeFi yield farming protocols, creating a fundamental mismatch with institutional capital deployment strategies. The regulatory framework, Genius Act and beyond. This might blow your mind, but the Genius Act specifically identifies the limited number of stablecoins that qualify as regulated U.S. payment stablecoins based on reserve composition. These include Circle's USDC, PayPal's PYUSD, and Ripple's RLUSD, creating an exclusive ecosystem of institutionally compliant digital dollar solutions. The legislation requires that permitted payment stablecoin issuers maintain segregated bankruptcy remote reserves, publish monthly attestations certified under penalty of perjury, and submit to annual audited financial statements. This regulatory framework eliminates algorithmic stablecoins and other experimental designs that lack proper asset backing. What's particularly significant is the Act's prohibition on yield-bearing features for payment stablecoins, ensuring they function as transactional instruments rather than investment products. This aligns perfectly with banks' needs for liquidity sourcing, algorithms, and foreign exchange volatility hedging tools. The price prediction models. Conservative versus bullish. Looking ahead, the convergence of regulatory clarity, institutional partnerships, and technical superiority creates a perfect storm for XRP adoption. Machine learning price prediction models suggest conservative targets of $3.12 by August 2025, with bullish scenarios reaching $5.50 plus based on sustained institutional buying momentum. But here's where it gets really interesting. If the aggregate crypto market cap reaches $20 trillion, a scenario supported by institutional adoption trends, XRP's market capitalization could potentially expand to $800 billion, implying a price above $13 per token. While this represents the high end of projections, the institutional infrastructure being built today, Stellar's silent revolution, the infrastructure play. Meanwhile, Stellar continues its quiet revolution in institutional finance. The upcoming Protocol 23 upgrade represents more than technical improvements. It's positioning Stellar as the backbone for central bank digital currencies and real-world asset tokenization. Recent partnerships with Franklin Templeton and the integration of major payment platforms demonstrate that Stellar isn't competing with XRP. It's building complementary infrastructure for different use cases. The network's total value locked surpassed $100 million, with institutional-grade projects like tokenized U.S. Treasuries driving adoption. While XRP dominates cross-border institutional payments, Stellar focuses on financial inclusion and programmable money applications, creating a diversified blockchain ecosystem that serves different institutional needs. The network effect and future value drivers? Think about this logically. As more banks integrate RLUSD and XRP-based settlement rails, the network effects compound exponentially. Each new institutional participant increases liquidity, reduces transaction costs, and strengthens the overall ecosystem's value proposition for subsequent adopters. With stablecoin market capitalization surpassing $250 billion in 2025 and growing at 22% year over year, the addressable market for compliant, institutional-grade digital dollar solutions represents a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. XRP's positioning as the bridge asset connecting these disparate stablecoin networks creates unprecedented utility demand. Personal investment philosophy. Why I'm bullish. Let me share something personal. After 15 years covering traditional finance and 5 years deep in the crypto trenches, I've learned to follow the institutional money, not the retail hype. The convergence we're witnessing, regulatory clarity, institutional partnerships, and technical infrastructure reminds me of the early internet adoption by enterprises in the late 1992. The institutions that master blockchain-based payment rails first will dominate the next generation of global finance. XRP and Stellar aren't just cryptocurrencies, they're becoming the foundational infrastructure for tomorrow's financial system. When trillion-dollar institutions start moving serious money through these networks, the price appreciation will make today's levels look like an absolute steal. Final thoughts. The institutional wave is here. This changes everything, folks. We're witnessing the largest transformation in global payment infrastructure since the creation of SWIFT in the 1972nd, and XRP holders are positioned at the epicenter of this institutional revolution. The convergence of regulatory clarity through the Genius Act, strategic partnerships with major banks, and technical superiority in cross-border settlement creates a compelling investment thesis that extends far beyond typical cryptocurrency speculation. As banks race to integrate blockchain-based payment rails to remain competitive, those that choose Ripple's proven infrastructure gain significant advantages in compliance, security, and operational efficiency. For XRP holders, this institutional adoption wave represents the fundamental value driver we've been anticipating for years. The quiet revolution is happening in boardrooms and treasury departments, not on social media. By the time the mainstream financial press catches up to these developments, the rails will already be laid, and institutional transactions will be flowing seamlessly across continents on networks designed for impact rather than hype. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because I'll be tracking every development in this rapidly evolving institutional adoption story. Drop a comment telling me which aspect excites you most. Are you positioning for Stellar's infrastructure play or XRP's bridge currency thesis? The early movers in this financial revolution won't just profit, they'll help write the rules for tomorrow's global economy. This is your host. And remember, when traditional finance embraces blockchain rails, the visionaries who positioned early don't just win, they transform entire industries. Let's keep building the future together.